website. So anyone who missed out, your friends, if they want to be able to view it, they would be able to go back and look at the presentation and listen to the audio. All right, let's get started. So this gives you a little information about TexProtects for those of you that aren't familiar with us. We are a membership-based statewide advocacy organization, and we really have 3 areas that we focus on that we do our work in. And the first is really looking at child abuse prevention and how do we prevent child abuse from ever happening in the first place? How do we keep those kids from coming into the system at the beginning? Then we also look at those systems that impact abused children, and primarily that's the Child Protective Services system, but it's also the criminal justice system to some extent. Children as witness, children in the juvenile justice system. We have some wonderful partners that we work with in these areas. So on the criminal stuff, you may not see as much from us as you do on the prevention side, but that is one of our main prongs. And then our third main prong is improvements to programs that heal victims. And obviously we wish that there were more state dollars spent on mental health services in the state of Texas, but it is something that a great many folks advocate for, and we do as well. This gives you a little summary of some of the things that we provide our folks with. We do all types of research. We even have a new TexProtects member that joined us, Dr. April Wilson. She joined us this summer, and she is our Director of Research. She's taken on a big project she's working on right now on home visitation. We do white papers. We advocate, obviously. We collaborate with a great many stakeholders. One of the groups that I'm going to tell you about next is the Child Protection Roundtable. And we have over 5,000 members that have signed up to get our alerts, and we provide them with summaries on legislation, research that we're doing, trainings, conferences. We've also helped people testify. We've helped people with talking points. And then we also do advocacy, not only on how to advocate up in front of the legislature, but on different child protection issues. And then one of the really fun things we do is we do advocacy days at the Capitol and different awareness events. The awareness events are primarily in Dallas, and we have done some in Austin as well. The roundtable that I mentioned is made up now. We've got close to 40 organizations. Actually, we're over 40 organizations that have as some part of their core mission child protection or welfare. It doesn't have to be the sole issue that they concentrate, but it has to be part of their core mission. And the goal of the roundtable is really to bring all those people together that are experts in the field, that are providers of services. The Child Welfare Board, Texas Council Child Welfare Board, is one of our members, and that's why we work so closely with them, to bring those folks together to really try to generate a consensus on budget goals and legislation so that we're all on the same page, because if we all speak with the same voice, the chances of getting what we want are much greater. When members hear different things, legislators hear different things from advocacy groups that are advocating on the same issue, and everyone's telling them something different, then they tend not to do anything. But when you've got a consensus and you've got a big group going forward saying the same message, it's much more powerful. And so now we have our first poll question. As we've got 2 polls that we're going to do, and this is new for us, so we're testing this out. But the question we're asking everyone to answer, and you'll have an opportunity to answer on shortly, is: have you previously met with a legislator? And if everyone will take a minute or so to take your poll and vote, cast that vote, and we will get those tabulated and get back to our presentation. And Amanda is hopefully getting in those results right now so we can actually show you the results. All right. As you can see, we've got quite a few folks on the phone that listening today that have met with a legislator before, so that's great. We have some expertise. So some of the information we're going to go over with regards to lobbying and advocacy you might be a little familiar with, and hopefully we can answer some more of those refined questions you may have. Thank you. So let's start with just a real basic definition, because one of the things that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with is they are worried that what they're doing is lobbying, and they say, I can't lobby, I'm not supposed to lobby, my organization has told me I can't lobby, or for some reason they think they can't lobby. So the first thing we really need to do is really clear up what's lobbying versus advocacy. And as you can see, the realm of advocacy is much, much bigger than what constitutes lobbying. And this is a slide, the picture on this slide is one that I borrowed from a friend of mine, she's retired executive director over at Tenoy's. We were in a presentation together and I saw this and I go, this really captures the essence of lobbying versus advocacy. So I want to give her credit for the image here. But advocacy is really educating, speaking up, informing, and championing a cause. And that is the realm of advocacy. And lobbying is really looking at that specific attempt to influence legislation. So we're talking a very specific legislation, a very specific act that's meant to influence legislation. Those are definitions. And then when we really get into what does Texas consider lobbying, what triggers the law in Texas, what would fall under lobbying. And so this is the definition. Lobby law regulates direct communications with members of the legislative or executive branch of state government to influence legislation or administrative action. Okay? So let's break that down. Let's start with direct communication. What does that mean? It includes contact either by person, by telephone, telegraph, letter, smoke signal. It's a direct communication that is directed to the member of the legislature or the executive branch of state government. So that means if your organization prints up a newsletter that is supportive of a bunch of pieces of legislation or arguing for a specific point on the budget, that newsletter, if it's meant for the public or if it's meant for your membership, that is not a direct communication that's going specific towards that member of the legislature. So even if they pick up that newsletter and read it, that is not considered a direct communication. You've got to intend that communication to go to the member. So the next is, okay, well, who exactly are we talking about when we say member of the legislative or executive branch of state government? So a member of the legislative branch of state government includes a member elect. So that means someone who's been elected but yet has not yet taken office. So all of our new state reps that have been elected this last November, but they won't get sworn in until January, that includes all of them. It also includes, and this is something that people don't normally think about, a candidate for or officer of the legislature or a legislative committee. And it also includes the employees. A lot of people are under the misconception that staff are not considered the member, and they are. So any direct communication to a staff person of a senator or state rep or the governor or the lieutenant governor would fall under this definition. Now, the executive branch is, of course, the member of the executive branch of the state government includes the officer, officer-elect, candidate. So that's our governor, anyone that would be running for governor. But it also includes an employee of any state agency, department, or office in the executive branch of state government. So that means that includes our folks over at the FPO. Now, one of the questions I frequently get, what about judges? I can't talk to judges. Is that lobbying? No. The judicial branch is specifically excluded from this definition. And this only applies to state. So local government officials, your county commissioners, your city councilmen, doesn't apply to them. This is excluded. So let's look at that last part of our definition, the communicating to influence legislative or administrative action. So when we talk about legislation, what exactly are we talking about? And we are talking about a matter that may be the subject of action by either house of the legislature or a legislative committee. So something that is or may be. So if it's a bill that's already filed, even if a committee hasn't taken it up yet, that's still something. If it's something that's getting ready to be filed, that would still be considered legislation. Administrative action, and most of you don't have to worry about administrative action, but these are really particularly gearing towards people that are trying to procure contracts with the state, the workings, the normal workings of state government. Those are the administrative matters. And this definition of lobbying covers that. Now, a lot of people want to know, where can I go? Because a lot of folks, our audience is probably very familiar with how you look up bills and where can I go to find a statute. Well, for folks that want to delve more into this, the Government Code, Chapter 305, is really what lays down all the requirements and talks about the Texas Ethics Commission, talks about the threshold for lobbying, has all the restrictions that are applicable to people that are required to register as lobbyists. And it also has the other section of the Government Code, Chapter 556, applies specifically to monies that are appropriated from the state to private entities, state agencies. There is a specific prohibition of not using appropriated funds for lobbying expenses. You can't hire someone, you can't use them for lobbying expenses. So if it's funds that have been appropriated from the state of Texas, those are considered public funds. You cannot use those public funds to finance lobbying efforts. There's prohibitions on state agencies contained in that chapter, prohibitions on state employees. But I do like to point out that chapter specifically says state employees, as long as you're not on the state dime, you're a private citizen and you have every right that a private citizen does to freedom of speech and to voice your concern. So it's really the reason a state employee in their official capacity couldn't lobby or couldn't go and ask the legislature for a specific ask is because their salary is an appropriated money, and so that is a prohibition. Now, this chapter, I don't know if we have any folks that are also on, like, work development boards or COGS. There are also specific regulations with regards to COGS, work development boards. There's a couple other regional type boards that fall under this chapter and have restrictions with regards to how they spend money and not being able to spend money on any kind of lobbying and being prohibited from lobbying. But those are spelled out within this chapter. Boards that are not statewide boards and that aren't in that list don't have to worry about those prohibitions. And then if anyone wants additional information, the Ethics Commission has all kinds of information, all kinds of pamphlets and guides. Okay, so one of the things is who is required to register as a lobbyist? And most of you, this would never apply to you because you don't receive any type of compensation to come and ask for something. So if you're coming up here as a private citizen, you don't have any restrictions whatsoever on you. You can come up here and you can ask the governor to support a bill, ask a member to support a bill. There's no restrictions whatsoever on a private individual to come and ask for something. There are limits and restrictions on people that meet these thresholds, and there are two. The first threshold is a compensation-based threshold. If you make more than $1,000 in a quarter as compensation, in other words, you're paid to go and lobby. You're paid to go and engage the legislature. If you make more than $1,000 a quarter, then you have to register as a lobbyist, and you have requirements, reporting requirements. Or if you spend more than $500 in a quarter to entertain members of the legislature, like let's say you take folks out to dinner or you send gifts that are under the limit. If you do that, if you spend more than $500 in a calendar quarter on those purposes, then you would have to register as a lobbyist. And those are the two compensation thresholds, the compensation and the expenditure threshold. Everyday folks, advocates, people that are just coming up here, our welfare board members, you don't ever have to worry about this. Okay. One of the things, and I heard this the other day, someone was saying, well, nonprofits can't lobby. And that is not correct. And I don't know if we have any folks that are employees of nonprofits or members of nonprofits, but that is not correct. Nonprofits can lobby, and this is under the IRS. This has nothing to do with Texas lobbying laws or rules. This is under the IRS. There are basically two tests under the IRS, and the first is called you can't have any substantial part of activities go towards lobby expenses. And substantial activities, of course, it's the IRS, is not defined. But in a letter that was issued by the IRS in 2000, they say, can a nonprofit, a 501c3 lobby? They definitively answer the question yes. And the general sense is, what does that mean, no substantial part? Most people have interpreted that to mean 5% of expenditures or less. Now, there is also a 501c3 H election, and under the H election, there's a sliding scale based on a law passed in 1976. That's a much more substantial amount you can use for lobby expenditures. There is a $1 million cap on that, but that's a much more substantial sliding scale. One thing that you cannot do, nonprofits, you cannot spend any public funds on lobbying. And that's just the same as I said earlier, no appropriated money, no public funds can be spent on lobbying. That's the same thing. Nonprofits is a prohibition. You can't spend any public funds on lobbying. So if you're getting any federal funds, any state funds, those cannot be spent on lobbying. And nonprofits cannot endorse a candidate for office. That is another big no-no. The other thing is that if you do lobbying and you spend some funds on lobbying, you have to keep track of that. And there is a great resource online. It's the Center for Lobbying and the Public Interest. They have all kinds of information if anyone needs any follow-up. All right. So now we're going to go through a little bit of understanding the legislative process. And this is how I have always thought of the legislative process. I think of, you've got a funnel, and you have these things that feed into the funnel, and it's a big funnel, very wide, and then slowly we get down to a small, narrow point. So in going into our funnel are ideas from constituents, ideas from advocate groups, ideas from other states, ideas from interim charge reports, ideas from the last session that didn't get passed. All those feed into the funnel to go, either the Senate does it or the House does it, or sometimes they both do it. Those ideas feed into there, and then the Senate and the House both file bills. So we have these balls that are the Senate and the House that have all these bills in them. Those get whirled around in all this process. Then those balls come, the stuff from those balls slowly starts trickling down. The governor is kind of the stopgap in that funnel. Actually, I should probably put his ball at the very bottom because he blocks it, because he can veto. Anything that comes out has to pass both of those. Anything that comes out, he can veto. Or he can sign it, or he cannot sign it, and it becomes, by operational law, it would go into effect. So all those things go into the funnel, and then they come out as a law if they get passed. And another way to look at the process in very simplified terms is we have a bill that gets filed. So, you go, you talk to a member, they say, yes, that's a great idea, let's file a bill. They file that bill, and then you start generating, hopefully you go talk to the committee chairman, you talk to the other members of the committee, you say this is a really good bill, this is a really good idea. The committee chairman agrees, they set the bill for hearing. Some committees, not all of them, will poll their members prior to a hearing to see if a bill has enough support to pass out before they ever even hear the bill, because the chairman doesn't want to waste his or her time with a measure that they know is not ultimately going to pass. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes they have hearings on stuff that they know it's not going to pass, but they want to take testimony on issue. They want to kind of air out the issue. So we've got that bill filed, we've talked to the chairman, we've talked to the members of the committee, we know we've got some support, we get a hearing, the hearing is held. Almost all committees won't pass out the bill that hearing. Usually they wait. Some don't, but most of them will wait. So the bill, term hearing, we wait a couple of days, or we wait until the next hearing, and then we get that bill voted out, hopefully. So once that happens, we then go on to calendars. The calendars process in the Senate and the calendars process in the House are very different, of course. And this is probably the most complicated part of the legislative process, is the calendars part, and how you negotiate calendars, navigate really calendars. There are lobbyists that are hired just because of their expertise with calendars and being able to move things through calendars. But let's say our bill that we had heard, we've got it over the calendars. We've got the calendar, the chairman in the Senate, he's going to go ahead and he says, yes, that's a great idea. Let's go ahead and pass it out on a local calendar. It goes out, and it goes before the entire chamber. If it goes out on a local calendar, it's done kind of strangely. It's kind of like a wholesale auction. There's a bunch of bills listed. They call them all out, and then they enter. No one really does an individual vote. They enter wholesale the number of votes. And unless someone specifically comes and says, I want you to show me voting no on that bill, it shows the whole Senate as a body voting yes. Now, if it goes to the floor, then that bill is actually, and the governor decides on the order of how those are going to be heard, but that bill is actually brought up on the floor of the Senate, and it is, and mostly those are your bigger bills, the things that are going to be debated. Or if it's later in the session, it may be a bill that members have identified as a good vehicle for amendments, and so they want it on the floor so they can try to amend it. But when it goes to the floor, that's where you normally would see, many of us are familiar with all the debate that goes on, and you see a vote goes. More so debate in the House than in the Senate. Usually by the time a bill has gone to the floor in the Senate, the debate, the discussions have already gone on. The Senate, since it is a smaller body, really does a lot of its working out of issues and problems in the committee process. And they rely on each other a lot more in the committee process to really kind of hammer out stuff. So usually when you see something come to the Senate floor, you see things that get voted on 31-0, 30-0, 29-0. You may have people just abstain from voting, but you usually see consensus and unanimous votes. The House is very different. You know, you've got to realize you've got 150 members. They can't really monitor what's going on in committees unless they're on those committees. And so many times things are going on and they're unaware of a bill until it comes to the floor. And that's why you see so much more action on the House floor because, you know, it might be a bill that they didn't know anything about. So here it comes. They get the sheets before so they know it's going to come. So that's when you start seeing all these questions. And the House really has much more vigorous debate normally than the Senate does. So we've gotten our bill. We got it to the Senate floor. We got a positive vote on it. It came out of there 31-0. So now we're at the top of this arrow. We're not done yet. We go over to the House, and the whole entire process starts over again. It doesn't have to be filed, but when it comes over from the Senate, it comes over right here, and now it has to be referred. So it gets in here. The Speaker has a little bit of control here, as does the Lieutenant Governor in the beginning once the bill gets filed and gets referred out, because they can hold up bills here. So it comes over, they acknowledge they get it, and then the Speaker refers it over to our committee. And then we get past the committee hearing, we get through navigate calendars, we get over there, and now we've got the whole process starting over. Now we have the whole process. We've gone through the Senate, we've gone through the House, now we go through to the governor. And then he can do what we talked about earlier. He can veto it, he can sign it, or he can let it become law. So that, in a nutshell, is a legislative process. So let me give you some really good resources, and some of you probably know most of these. When you are starting to get more and more savvy and more comfortable with coming and asking and talking to members and supporting your legislative agendas and asking for specifics in the budget or a certain bill that your organization is working on, the more you have time to kind of get detailed information, the better, because there are so many resources for you to choose from. Obviously, the Texas Senate has information on all the senators, all the committees, hearings, as does the Texas House of Representatives. You can watch the committee hearings via feeds. You can go back if you didn't get a chance to see the committee hearing. You can go back and watch archives. In your meetings with your members, you always want to go to these websites and read the bio information so you know a little bit about what they do, where they come from. Also, each senator has a campaign website. The campaign websites are a great place to get information on a member. For statistics about kids, about children that are in the CPS system, these two resources, the DFPS data book and the Kids Count data book, are great. DFPS has data even by county on the number of abused kids, the number of kids in foster care, the number of kids in family-based safety services. The Kids Count data book has incredible demographic information, and that's our friends over at Center for Public Policy Priorities, Frances, does a wonderful job there. And she's always, if you've got something that you can't find in her data book, you can always ask her for it, and she can point you to where you can get that. The Legislative Council is the agency that takes care of drafting statutes. And they've got an incredible amount of information on their website. Some people really get into redistricting. So there's all kinds of information on maps and how you can see the maps, information on how to read a statute, how to read a bill, all kinds of guides. They've got even a drafting guide if you want some help on, I want to draft my own legislation, just a wealth of knowledge. And then, of course, Texas Legislature Online is that one that we almost all use to go and look up bills, look up statutes. And we actually, the next slide has, I'll show you, that has a pull-up from that. This next one, the Texas Reference Library, Legislative Library, is one that a lot of people don't know about, and it is an incredible wealth of information. It's got all kinds of stuff on voting trends and histories, and if you just have a chance to get on that website and kind of play around and look at some of the information, it's very informative. And then finally, what I have here is the Legislative Budget Board. This is if you're looking at the budget, if you're wondering information about the budget, and they actually have a really good reference book on there as well about understanding the budget, a very basic reference material on understanding the budget. And this is where you would go to once the budget, the first SB, it's going to be an SB this session. Once SB1 gets filed, this would be the website where the actual text of the bill would be. Oh, my next button. Oh, there we go. So this was the TLO, the Texas Legislature Online, which is that website we had on the preceding page. This is something that almost everyone that follows legislation, follows the budget, follows the activities up here is familiar with. And it's got some buttons up here. You can get to the House website easy, the Senate website easy, committees, calendars, so you don't have to actually enter through the House and the Senate website. Great information. Now, one of the reasons why I put this page up there is I frequently get asked from people, what are the differences on these bills? So you typed in your bill number that you want to find out. So let's say we're wanting to find out about SB 218. This is a bill that we supported, that we worked on with Sarah Nelson last session. So you would put 82nd regular, that was last session. You type in SB 218 up here. This is what you pulled up. And the first tab is going to be the history tab, but you click on text. And so you pull this up and you see all these introduced, committee report, engross, enroll, and people are like, what is the version that is law? And so the introduced version, this is what was the first thing that was filed. So when the bill was first filed, this is what it looks like. Now, the bill gets set for hearing once it gets set for hearing, that generates what we call a fiscal note. And a fiscal note is an estimate of what it is going to cost the state of Texas to implement that bill. Also, the first hearing will trigger a bill analysis. And the bill analysis, because a lot of people look at statute and they go, oh, my God, how do you read that? The bill analysis the bill analysis tells you in plain English what this statute means, what it does, what it impacts. So we've got it filed. We have a hearing. After the hearing, it gets kicked out of committee, and now it's going to be called the Senate Committee Report version. So this is after the hearing. And sometimes sometimes it gets amended. You'll hear the term committee substitute. That means the bill was substituted in committee. The Senate doesn't like to really amend stuff during the process. They'd rather just substitute and have a whole new bill than have a bill that has a bunch of amendments. So they'll do a substitute. They get a whole new bill. Sometimes because of the amendments, that's going to trigger a different fiscal note. Because it may add things or take things, and it also is going to trigger an analysis, a bill analysis. And then over here at the end, the witness list, this is the actual witness list of the people that testified at the Senate hearing. And that includes both people that gave live testimony and people that submitted written testimony. The House doesn't always record people who submit written testimony. The Senate almost always does. So we came out of committee, we went to the floor of the Senate, and our bill passed, SB 219 passed. So now it's called engrossed. And engrossed just means that it has passed one of the two bodies. So in this instance, this bill, SB, that started in the Senate, has passed the Senate. Now, if this bill was an HB, which stands for, of course, House bill, and it was engrossed, that means it had passed the House. So either one, it's passed one body, it becomes engrossed. So when this Senate bill went to the Senate floor, you never know. Someone may have put on an amendment. Somebody may have struck some language during the debate on the Senate floor. So the version may have changed a little bit. So that's why we now call it engrossed. This is the product of the floor debate. Same thing, they may have stuck on an amendment, so now we need to know, is there any change in the fiscal implications to the state of Texas, generates another fiscal note. You will generally not see an additional bill analysis here because one's going to be done over here, so you generally won't see one. So we come out of the Senate, we go over to the House, same thing. House, here's the bill. Guess what? We're going to change it up. We want something different. We want this amendment, so it's now different. So now it's the House Committee Report. So after the House, it goes to the floor of the House. It gets voted on the House. And then if it's the exact same bill, if they didn't change it any, it becomes enrolled. If there were changes, then we work those out in what we call conference committees. And then once both bodies agree on a bill, we get enrolled. And then that is what gets sent to the governor. And if you look on the history tab, I can't click it on here because we're not live here, but if you would look onto the history tab, it will tell you if a bill has been enacted. So you will know if it has become law. And one thing that a lot of people do is they get on a history tab, they look up a bill, and they say, oh, it says it didn't pass, so this must not be law. That is not necessarily true. A lot of folks, if they're good at what they do, if they see that their bill is dying, for some reason it's stuck in a process, they just ran out of time, they may take the bill in its entirety, or they may take a part of the bill, and they will amend it on to something else. So when you're looking up something to try to see if something passed, don't just take the history as, oh, it didn't pass. What you really need to do to find out if something truly passed or not is to do a word search with the part of the code that it was impacting to find out if it got picked up in some other legislation. And a little cheat, one of the easiest ways to find out if something actually got passed is to call the author's office that authored the bill and say, hey, were you guys able to get this on to something else? And usually the person that worked on the bill will tell you right away, yeah, we were able to amend it onto such and such, so if you want to go look at the final version, pull up this bill. All right. So this next part is really about trying to focus on that easy framework for how do I get comfortable with going up and speaking with my legislatures. Obviously, we've got 70% of you have already done this. I'm going to give hopefully a little bit of tips this time about, because this is an advocacy presentation that we have done before, to give you a little information about generating some interest for your issue and some other helpful hints when you're trying to advocate for your issue. So every legislative session, it's an incredible amount of bills that get filed. We're usually close to 6,000 bills. And last session, no different. We were at almost 5,800 bills. Last session, our pass rate was a little higher than normal. Usually the pass rate hovers around 20%, which is 1 in 5. Last session, we were a little bit higher. But you got to remember, we've got 5,800 bills in 140 days every other year. So you're talking about a tremendous amount of information coming at these folks in a very short amount of time. How do you make your idea, what you're supporting, stand out from the others? And hopefully what I'm going to give you today is a little bit of tips about how to do that. So our 4 I's, and hopefully a number of you are familiar with these, but our 4 I's are identify, interest, inform, and investment. And this is our very simple framework. You can use this, not only with members of the legislature, you can use this in any aspect of your life. I gave a talk yesterday up in the Woodlands. This lady who was a social worker sat there when we were talking about being advocates, and she goes, "Oh, I've never done that. I've never advocated like that. I've never done that." And I go, "Well, what do you do for your clients?" And she started going through what she does for her clients, and I go, "That's advocating. You're doing it." I go, "That's what you want to do." I go, "You just, instead of doing it with a service provider, you're going to do it to someone that's sitting behind a desk that just got elected." And so most people have done this. They're not really conscious of doing it. So our first one is very easy, and that's, actually identifying who do you need to go talk to. This can get, obviously, for the bare bones, you want to talk to your state rep, your state senator. You can go on the website, find out who represents me. But as you get more sophisticated with this, when you start identifying and you start really thinking about, okay, who matters to my issues? You always want to go to your state senator and your state rep because you've got more pull with them because you're a constituent, you vote. But you also, as you start getting more and more sophisticated, you start identifying those members that you really need to win over for your issue. And so let's say it's an issue pertaining to Child Protective Services. So we know that an issue pertaining to Child Protective Services is going to go to the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate and Human Services in the House. So that just expanded the number of people we need to identify. We need to identify the members that sit on the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate, and we need to identify the members that sit on the Human Services Committee in the House. So you identify all those folks, and those are the folks that you want to convince about your ideas. Those are the folks you want to talk to because that's where your bill's going to go. Those are the people that are going to be voting on your bill. Now, unfortunately, those two bodies, the Human Services Committee in the House and the Health and Human Services Committee in the Senate, don't get appointed until we're already into session. And it's usually not until sometime in February until we hear who those folks are going to be. Now, traditionally, the Senate has not really changed that much. And so you always know, well, it's going to be the same folks that were on last time. This time is very different. We have quite a few new senators coming in. We have some key senators that have left. By those key senators leaving, it has really juggled the people in the Senate and their committee assignments. So while the Lieutenant Governor has already announced who the chairs of the various committees are going to be, he has not announced who membership of those committees are going to be yet. And that is something that he, it's the power he has. And sometimes he waits because for whatever reasons to name those committees. So we might hear it a little bit earlier than February this year, but then again we may not. It depends on what's going on with the process. So we do know that Senator Jane Nelson will be the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. We also know that Senator Tommy Williams is going to be chair of the Finance Committee, which is a very important committee. And that committee is where all the money issues go through. So that's why it's so important. Because one of the very key folks that sits on Health and Human Services got appointed to the Transportation Committee, and that would be Senator Nichols. We don't know for sure what the makeup of the Health and Human Services Committee is going to look like. Senator West got a new chairmanship. He's going to be a chair of jurisprudence. So we're hoping that our members that sat on that committee last time will still be the same ones this time, but we're not positive. So we have to wait and see on that. On the House side, Richard Raymond, as a Democrat, was appointed by Speaker Strauss to chair Human Services last session. We don't know for sure if he is going to maintain the chairmanship or not. Speaker Strauss is probably thinking about the number of Republican chairmanships, the number of Democratic chairmanships, looking at that very carefully. The Republicans didn't gain any seats in the House, but the members that are coming in are a little bit more to the right than the members that have left. And so there's a chance that he may realign the number of Republican and Democrat chairmanships. But the Human Service Committee has almost traditionally been a Democrat. Ever since I've been working, it's always been a Democrat. So we would hope that Richard Raymond's got a good relationship with the Speaker. We would hope that he would stay chairman of Human Services. The membership of his committee will probably greatly change. I know there are a few folks on there that have requested to be on there and they want to be on there. A lot of the members that get on there, they don't necessarily want to be on that committee. And you may ask, why not? The reason is that it's traditionally not a committee that allows them the ability to connect with people that they would be able to see as potential donors. It's not a strong committee where a lot of business interest goes through. It's almost all the people that do business in that committee were all nonprofits. We're not going to be getting very involved in their campaigns. So they traditionally stay away from the Human Services Committee. But the other key committee, other than Health and Human Services and Human Services, that you would want to identify is if you've got a budget issue. If you've got a budget issue, then the Finance Committee in the Senate, which of course we just shared, is chaired by Tommy Williams, very important. The Appropriations Committee in the House, chaired by Chairman Pitts, and he will probably stay the chair of that, very important. Now, the House also has a public Article 2 committee that handles all the health and human services. That was chaired by Representative Zerwas, Dr. Zerwas last time. We anticipate him doing that again. Very important person to the process, budget process. Representative Donna Dukes has almost always been on that committee. We see her being on that committee. She takes a very active role in the CPS budget. She kind of oversees that for that committee. We would anticipate that that would be the case again. So if you've got a budget issue, those are the folks that you really want to get into and see. So when we also talk about identifying, we're talking about not only being able to say, okay, so-and-so is my state rep. I just moved, and so I have a new state rep, Jason Isaacs. And, so I know who he is, but now I really want to identify more with him. I want to know more about him. And so what do? How do you identify with someone? You start with, like I told you, you can pull up their state website, you read the bio, you go to their campaign website, you read the information on there. A lot of them will put stuff about the organizations they belong to. I belong to the NRA, I belong to this church, I'm a member of, Boy Scouts, I have children at this school. So you really see areas where you could potentially find a connection with that person. And that's what you're really looking at. You're looking for a way to connect with someone. And so look at those sites, see if there's something that you have in common. You might go to the same church, your kids might go to the same school. That gives you something to start with a talking point, so kind of like an icebreaker. Another way is to create that interest. If you get on their campaign website and you read about their platform, or you know the type of legislation they've passed in the past, and you look at that, a good example is Senator Carlos Uresti, who I used to work for. If you go and you look at the things that he has supported, he is always involved in child abuse prevention issues. He is always involved in child protective services issues. Very important to him. So, right away you would have anyone who's on the child welfare board would have something that they can connect with him, because it's a passion issue for him, it's a passion issue for you. So right away you've got a connector there. Another way to really kind of, get that interest and identify is, legislators really respond to people that are very active in their districts. And you may ask yourself, why? And that's because active people vote. And not only do active people vote, active people influence other people to vote. Many of you that are involved, I'm sure, on your welfare boards, you have probably friends that ask you, hey, who do I vote for? I know you know about politics and who's running. Who do I vote for? So members know that. Members know that the active members in their communities are the people that are influencing votes. The other thing they really respond to are organizations that are engaged and understand the process. Organizations that they see time and time again testifying, getting out there, urging other people to testify, and that they know what's going on, how to work the system. They respond to that and organize efforts. And when you have advocacy days and you have 300 people show up and you're all talking about child protection issues and issues that are important to children, they take interest in that and they respond to that. So once we have identified our member and we have identified some potential connector, then we really talk about the interest. Okay, how do you get them interested? And this is where there's several different ways. When you can connect either with a personal story, and this can come from news, or it can come from something that's happened to you or to your neighbor or to your child. Members always want to hear personal stories. Think about this during the presidential debates, right? We're on a national stage. We have both Mitt Romney and Barack Obama talking about meetings or visiting with someone in a small town in Pennsylvania. You know, I met a mother. I met a teacher. I met a factory worker. You know, those personal stories, members love to use those personal stories later on when they're debating things because it puts a face on things. You know, you say put a face on it. That's what it really does. And it helps people connect better than just hearing the data. Now, the data, don't get me wrong, is always very good, but getting in there with a personal story is always very helpful. Now, if you don't have a personal story, there may be something that was in a news article. Let's say, you know, you pick up the paper and, you know, something horrible has happened to a child. I could tell you that the person that represents that district knows about that because all state reps, all senators look at their papers from their districts, even when they're in Austin. They get clippings. Most of them also have a person assigned to their staff to go through the newspapers, go through the articles, and if something is important to their district or something important to an issue that they're working on comes up, then their staff is supposed to do a summary and notify them. So they're very aware. So you can use, you know, something from your own history, something from the news, something from a friend, but get that interest sparked. You know, and remember, they don't want to be seen as being a bad guy. You know, these folks, these ladies, they are up here to serve their community, and it's a hard job. You know, think about it. They're away from their families. They're not getting paid very much for it at all. It's a very hard job, and they want to be seen as responsive. And so when you're telling them about something from home, something from the news, or something from that happened in their community, they're gonna want to hear that. Now, another way, let's say there's not any articles, you don't have a personal story, but almost all of you, I think, that do this as a passion issue do have personal stories. But let's say you want to build more interest for your bill or for your issue. These are some ways to really build issue for your interest for your issue, and that's, you know, the easiest one is to collaborate with other organizations. You remember I said members respond to organized efforts, and this is what this is talking about. You know, collaborating with other organizations that have similar goals really is key because not only are you coming to this member with, you know, your county child welfare board's issue, but guess what? We've also got someone from our local CASA here. We also have someone for our local CAC here. We have someone from our local Boys and Girls Club. We have someone from our, you know, food pantry here. When you start collaborating and bringing those folks together and into the meetings even together, now you don't all want to talk, but when you bring those kind of folks together, what that automatically does is it raises the amount of attention you're going to get because what have you done? You brought not only yourself, but all those other people that, guess what, they're very active in the community. They probably vote too. But you're also starting to bring people in that are influencers in the communities. And all of those organizations have boards, and all those board members are definitely influencers in the community. And so that's why collaboration is so successful in generating interest among the legislature. It's also very good when you start talking like that because it really helps you plan for your community and coordinate strategies with your community on how you're going to deliver services. You know, in this time of scarce resources, all communities need to do that, and I think probably most communities are. Another way to really generate interest is organize an event. You know, one of the things that we did last year was Child Protection Day with Texas Council Child Welfare Boards. We had, I don't know how many partners we had, Nancy. We probably had 20 partners on that thing. And it was a great turnout. It was, we had over 300 people. We had folks out there with these umbrellas and chanting. We had people meeting with their legislatures. We had members attending briefings. And we brought issue. We got press coverage, a great way to bring up interest. And the other thing to do is go to your local media outlets. Try to get them to cover your issue. I know it's hard to try to get sometimes the good things in the newspaper or the good things covered on TV, the local news. But, if you've got a very special story, go to them and say, hey, I've got this great story, this family that we helped out, can you come cover it? And if you keep on, bothering them about it, they will eventually come and give you some airtime. And so you generate those stories in the local media outlets, and guess what? Remember what I said earlier, legislators look at all that. And so, you get that information, and if it's a clip, a video, if you're on the news, see if you can get the segment that you appeared on, send that to the legislative office. Now op-eds, of course, another very important way. Madeline McClure, our executive director, she gets usually a couple of op-eds put in the Dallas Morning News a couple of times a year. The other thing is blogs. It's a way to talk about your issue, your organization, get your name out there, and it's free. And our next I is informed. And this is, make sure that the easiest way to be comfortable when you are talking to someone about your issue is for you to have confidence in yourself about your issue. That's what really brings, comfort and ease in speaking with other people. And so you've got to be informed, and you don't have to, by any means, know all the answers. I don't know all the answers. I get asked questions all the time. I don't know the answers. But, my first reply is, that's a really good question. I'm not sure on the answer to that. I will get right back to you. And I get the email address, and I go and I find the answer, and I get it back to them. And they appreciate that just as much as if you spit it off the top of your head. Be informed with your issue. Make sure you develop a very focused message. You don't want to tell a big story and have this great connection and then not really go anywhere with the time you've got. When you're able to capture their attention and capture their interest, you want to be able to deliver a focused message that really informs them about the issue that you're addressing, so that they can concentrate on it and you can get what you want. You want to be a resource for that member. You ideally want to be in a place where she calls you or he calls you or he has a staff person calls you and say, hey, we've got this CPS bill that just came in, and I just really want to know, what's your take on this? What does your organization think about it? That's where you want to be. When I get calls from legislative staff saying, we got asked to carry this bill, what do you think about it? Is it a good bill? Should we carry it? That makes my day because that's what I want to be. I want to be a resource. I want them to be comfortable enough with me and have confidence in what I'm going to tell them, that they're using us as resources. And tied to that is never, ever overstate or understate a problem or a solution, because what happens is you damage your credibility. If you tell them something that's not correct, it damages your credibility. Now, that's not to say that you may say something and all of a sudden you find out, oh, man, I said that and I thought it was this. I'm going to go back and, change it right away. You're okay there, but you just don't ever want to build something up and leave an impression that isn't correct. You also, when you go in, if you're trying to get someone to carry a bill for you, and you go in and you talk to them and you say, I've got this bill, they're going to ask you, okay, what are the downsides? Who's going to support this? Who's not going to support this? You want to be totally honest with them, because the worst thing you can do is have them be blindsided and then say, well, how come you didn't know that? Because then you look like you're not credible and you don't know what's going on. Okay. Oh, hold on. Got the investment. So this is the most difficult thing for everyone, I think, is the ask. And that is a lot of people have a hard time really asking for something. People that are out campaigning, asking for money and support, it's very difficult. It really is. And so for us, when we go and we sit with our legislators and we meet with them, it's difficult to try to get that commitment from them. But if you don't ask for that, you won't get it. And so you always need to, when you're presenting, let's say you go in, you present a bill, you need to ask for their support. And you go in, you lay out you connect with them with your personal story, you get to your point, you say, this is the bill we have, this addresses this concern, it solves this problem. I would really appreciate your support. Can we count on you? And depending on what it is, they're going to tell you yes. A lot of people have a hard time saying no. So, and some of them will tell you no, but a lot of them, they don't want to seem callous or mean. So they may try to, dance around and it's like, well, I'll take this under consideration and I'll get back with you on that. And so if you get a sense that they're trying to kind of hedge up about it, then one thing you can do is you can say, well, what else do you need from me before I can count on your support? And they may tell you. They may say, well, I have an issue with this. Can you get this worked out? Or so-and-so came to me and they've got a problem with it. Can you work that out? But you got to try to go down those trails. And also the ask is not always about sponsoring a bill or supporting a bill. Having a member support your issue, that's an ask. Having them, it's not just about, I can only see them in the context of passing legislation or supporting budget initiatives. Also think about getting them involved with your issues. Can you come to our event? We're having a holiday party. We're giving backpacks to kids, and we want you to be present that day. Really trying to gauge them in your issues and in your organizations in those ways. And then this ask part becomes easier and easier as you have a personal connection with people. Okay. So let's put these 4 I's to work. I'm going to give you we're going to go through this quickly. I was hoping that we were going to have you out before the 2 hours today, and I can guarantee you that we are. So let's go through the 4 I's and put them to work to set up a meeting. So what are we going to do? We're going to call up the office, and we're going to ask to speak to the person who schedules for the legislator. Almost all of them have a scheduler. Senate folks usually have someone separate. The House, since they have smaller staff, that person usually doubles up with other duties. But you're going to talk to them, and you're going to tell them, who you are, what organization you belong to. Now, if you are speaking to your rep or your senator, it is key that you tell them you are a constituent. If you're not a constituent, but your organization serves their constituents or is located in the district, make sure you say that. If you're going in and you're not talking to your state rep or your state senator, but you're talking to someone on the Human Services Committee, you say, I have an issue that's going to be coming before the Human Services Committee that's very important, or I have an issue that I think the chairman may find very important that's on Human Services. and you get that information out at the beginning. You give them, what the topic is that you want to talk about, and always ask for 20 minutes. You may not always get it, but always ask for 20 minutes. And if they say, I'm sorry, but their schedule is completely full, a lot of times during the session, it's really hard to get in to see folks, especially the senators, because they have so many more constituents. So what you want to do is, say, well, can I get 5 minutes this time? I just really need a couple of minutes. It's very important. And they may still say, I'm sorry, but they can't. So then ask and say, well, can I talk to the person who handles the issue? This is either going to be a policy analyst, a legislative director, a chief of staff, sometime a legislative aide. But don't feel slighted in the least if you are meeting with someone that's not the member. In the Senate, the senators really, really rely on their staff. They are stretched so thin that a lot of times it's the staff informing them on vote choices, on key pieces of legislation, and they really listen to them. In the House, it depends on the member. Some members rely really heavily on their staff, others don't. It just depends on their members. But one of the key things, whether it's someone that relies heavily on their staff or not, always remember you always want to be super, super nice to the staff person. Because while they may not make the difference on if the member's going to support your position, they can surely cause problems for you in terms of all kinds of things, actually, getting to see the person, even generating ill will for your position. You always want to stay on the good side of them. And you got to remember, these folks are incredibly overworked too, and they're very, very busy. And you recognize that and thank them for that. And then the other thing I always do, I always get an email address, and I always follow it up with the email request. Thank you for a phone conversation earlier. I look forward to meeting with so-and-so on such and such day. Please let me know if anything changes. The best way to contact me is either email me or here's my cell phone number. Because calendars get shuffled all the time. And please don't get slighted if the calendar gets shuffled and they have to reschedule you. So we've got our appointment. We've sent a follow-up to the, if it's out, like let's say, it's out 2-3 weeks, I would send a follow-up email to the scheduler. And a lot of times the scheduler will contact you, but just say, I'm making sure I'm confirming such and such appointment. Make sure you know where you're going. If you're meeting them up here, you look up their district offices or you look up their capital offices. One of the questions I get all the time is, where do I park? There is actually a visitors parking garage on the corner of 12th and San Jacinto. Make sure you bring your materials, any materials you want to leave. Now, one of the things that you may want to do is if you do have some materials, it depends on how confident you are about talking with your materials. You may want to wait to give them anything until after you finish talking. Some people, not all people, will read the materials while you're talking, so that takes attention away from you. It depends on the person. I know that when I was a staff person, if someone came in and sat down with me and started talking, I would ask them, do you have a one-pager on that? And the reason I would ask them is not that I would read it while they were talking. It's because I would take notes that I had on that piece of paper. Because these folks get a ton of material every day. And if I found that the best place to take my notes were on the actual document, that way they wouldn't get lost from the document. So, don't feel bad if they ask you, well, can I see a one-pager on that? But the preference would be to give that to them after you finish speaking. Always, dress business casual to business dress. Please always wear comfortable shoes. The marble floors up at the Capitol are just horrible. And especially if you're going to be running around all day to all the offices. always be early. I always try to get everywhere about 10 minutes early. Sometimes if you get there early and the member has finished with their meeting before you early, you'll get extra time. They'll call you in and you'll get extra time with them, and that's always nice. And rehearse what you're going to say. If you're nervous at all, rehearse what you're going to say. Tell your spouse, your friend, practice in the mirror. The more times you say something, the more comfortable you become with it. And the key thing, I tell everybody is, these are folks just like you. They may be elected to serve their districts, but they're just like you. And so, a lot of them have the same passions, and they may think the same things. And so don't get nervous and don't say, oh, I can't talk to that person. They're a senator. They're just like you. The first thing you want to do when you actually sit down with them is you want to thank them. Tell them, thank you for representing us. If they're your senator, they've made an incredible commitment to the state of Texas. It's a lot of work. It's very hard. And thank them. And briefly tell them who you are, why you're there, why it's important to you, and really get to your point quickly. You want to have your agenda. You want to hit your topics. A lot of folks talk about elevator speeches. Imagine you've got to convince somebody of something while you're riding up in an elevator. So you really want to be direct, to the point. No more than 3 issues. Maybe make sure you really listen to what they're saying, their questions, their posture. One of the things that if you're working with a group, you're going to want to do is report back how they, reacted to your presentation and to the issue. And so you can really tell a lot by observing how someone is sitting. Did they all of a sudden cross their arms and pull back from you? Did they start, writing down notes frantically? If you see some of that, then you may, stop and say, do you have some concerns with that, or is there some additional information I can get you? Never be disagreeable. One of the tricks that Madeline does all the time is when someone asks a question, she's always, that's a very nice question. That's a very good question. I see that point, but let me tell you about this, and then go on from there. And don't forget to ask for the investment. Make that ask. And so now we are to the end of our presentation. We are going to do another poll for which time frames work for you. Now, our next webinar that we've already set up on the budget is going to be at the same time frame, because we're hoping to be able to do this over lunch. But if that doesn't work well for folks, then please, vote right now. Let's tally up. Let's see what's the best time frame for everybody. And I'll give everyone a little bit of time to vote. And then once everybody is voted, Amanda is going to put up the polling results. And we really appreciate everyone taking the time to join today, and I hope this was informative. I've got my contact information. Here we go. We hit it on the money. It's very nice to know. The majority of the folks feel that the 12 to 2 time frame works for them. Well, that's good to know, because that's when we scheduled our next one. And we've got a couple more, and we will schedule them around that same time frame. And we will also try to get it down to where probably the next one we might just go ahead and do an hour and a half, which is what my goal was today, which I'm going to hit that right on the head here. Once again, those 2 important dates we've got down on the calendar so far is our next webinar on the budget. And this is going to be Budget 101. Don't say, oh, God, I don't really want to know anything about the budget. We're going to do a little bit of background on the budget, and then we're going to go into the budget agenda for the Texas Child Welfare Board for this upcoming session. What are those things that CPS needs? What are those things that we're going to need to protect? And then our April 5th is our Child Protection Day, which we're so excited about. We've already got a number of groups committed, so it should be a big one again. I know that the Texas Council Child Welfare Board is very excited. They're ordering some stuff, so we'll have some exciting things like we did last time. You know, there are a lot of really exciting things going on right now as we get ready to go into the 83rd session. I'm sure all of you know we just got a brand new commissioner over at DFPS. Judge John Specia will take over, I think, Monday will be his first day, actually. And incredible person, super, super bright. He has been working on these issues for a long, long time. We have all known him as a fellow advocate. So he really will bring a great perspective to that position because he has examined CPS for so long. And so I'm really excited about it, and I think he'll do a wonderful job. I wish Commissioner Baldwin well. I think he was a very nice man. But I am very, very excited about John Specia, and I think he's going to do an incredible job. And that is it for today. I actually fibbed to you guys. I do not have my contact information at the end of the presentation, but I do have Amanda's contact information. See how I did that? If you don't get our email alerts, you can email Amanda. She'll get you signed up. You know, we send out the advocacy alerts. We send out all kinds of samples. We'll be sending out our survey here soon. Oh, thank you. I see Amanda went ahead and put my email address in the chat section, so there it is. If you need to get in touch with me, please, any questions, I love responding to folks and helping them meet with folks. If you are, want to go meet with your legislators up here and you get in and you get meetings and you're like, I'm really nervous and you need someone to go with you, please contact us. If we can, we will. It's always just a matter of time that, I'll definitely run you through. If you want to call me and run your talking points by me, by all means, I will help you. And if I can, I'll go even sit in with your meetings because that's what we enjoy doing. And, we're all doing this to help out kids in Texas and try to keep them out of the system. And for those that are unfortunately are in the system to make it a better place for them. So thank you all very much, and I will look forward to talking to y'all again in another couple of weeks. Want to make sure, hopefully I haven't missed any questions. Amanda, Nancy, do you have any parting words? All right.
I certainly would like to thank you all for a very informative time, and we, as the Texas Council, we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. We enjoy doing it.
We look forward to the next one.
All right. Well, everyone have a great day. Wish you well, and hopefully everyone will have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.